Alright, well, I began reading The Lord of the Rings recently during a period when, due to my fiance's health, we were forced to kind of stay indoors more, and I wanted something that I could do where people might not be expecting the mountain backgrounds, the traditional Old Norse and language history videos and myth videos and such. Series has received mixed, but I would say probably more positive than negative reaction. And at, well, I mean, yeah, Lauren's insistence, I have kept looking at the comments, tried to stay up with what people say about it and ask about. And since we're between the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers, I thought I'd do a quick review of issues raised in the comments and such, and what I might have to say about them. All right, ignore the Zoom thing where it, interprets my actions as some wish to show a thumbs up, right? I thumb up and it does the stupid thumbs up bubble. All right, so from the very beginning, let's see. I mentioned in video one that I was seeing a lot of overtones of addiction in the ring and its hold on Gollum and its potential hold on others. And Matthew Colville, whoever that guy is, right, said that Tolkien's perception of addiction was related not to a chemical but to power. And I get that. But I think that clearly there is something kind of similar going on in the psychology of addiction to power and addiction to a chemical. I do think, as I've read through more of the Fellowship of the Ring, that I've gotten the sense that the ring is a false power on the hand of the person that has it. It makes you think or feel like you're in control while you are still controlled by the one who made it, who is the actual Lord of the Rings, right? That's my current interpretation of Lord of the Rings. Although in Beowulf, Ring of Thingol, Lord of the Rings is Beowulf himself, I think. A lot of people commenting that I should be reading the Silmarillion, often with a kind of an implication that I should be reading the Silmarillion instead. I'm not going to quit halfway through since I've actually been able to keep this going and start the Silmarillion, but I might do the Silmarillion afterwards. Seems like a potentially good follow-up if people remain pretty interested in this. I see some comments about William Morris and his influence on Tolkien, which is clearly huge. William Morris is not a writer that I have a lot of fondness for. That kind of fakey archaism just reads. It falls on very unsympathetic ears with me, but I know some people like it. Tolkien's archaism, at least, is more artful, right? I mean, yeah, sometimes it can seem odd to me. I won't say fakey in the case of Tolkien because he knows the languages so well that he makes it sound good. William Morris winds up sometimes sounding more archaic than Chaucer, right? Which is just absurd. Ian on the first video said Sam's speech is largely due to the influence of his children. He was modeled after a real life person, and his speech pattern is maintained here despite its oddity. That's interesting. I can see that. And that includes that Lord bless me phrase that I had been quizzical about in the first couple chapters, being just a representation of a particular person's dialect. That makes perfect sense to me. Scrolling through here looking for more themes in the first video's comments. There are people who observed on this video and others that originally he was trying to write a sequel to The Hobbit, but that darker tone pops up as he starts to try to integrate it more into the world of the Silmarillion. That makes perfect sense to me. And then there are some comments that I can only call pedantic about what specifically, this person or that person is meant to be. And remember that part of the point of this video and video series is that I don't have a huge background in Tolkienia and as such, but that I have a similar academic background to Tolkien himself, although a very different personal background. So just seeing if there's any sort of insight that comes from that, or perhaps curious remarks that come from that people want to see. Some of that gets pretty pedantic, to say nothing of the gross internet racism that occasionally comes up, but I don't dignify that with remarks. Not saying being a pedant and being racist is the same thing or similar. They're obviously, very minor and very bad. Two different things. Someone named Mike in the first video said, I wonder if a more direct comparison for the story of the corrupting ring lost in water is the ring from the saga of Rolf Kraki. That is a really interesting parallel. Gosh, this story is not at the tip of my tongue. It's in the saga of Rolf Kraki, which I translated and which is in my fourth book, the two sagas of mythical heroes, the saga of Rolf Kraki and the saga of Hervor and Haedrek. Let me see if I can pull up this parallel just in the PDF of my own translation here. Yeah, I'll read you a little bit from my translation of the saga of Rolf Kraki in chapter 11. There is a ring that causes some conflict. So the time came that their brother-in-law Savil died, and Savil's son Hrok took over his kingdom after him. He was a tough man and very ambitious. His mother told Hrok much about the ring that the brothers Helgi and Hroar owned. And I don't think, she said, that it's unlikely at all that the brothers will repay us with some part of their wealth because we assisted them when they avenged our father. But thus far they have repaid neither your father nor me. Off quote. Hrok said, quote, you speak the absolute truth, and this is a shameful matter, and now I will find out what honor they'll give us for this. Off quote. Then Hrok journeyed to visit King Helge and asked him for a third of the kingdom of Denmark or for that good ring, because he did not know that Hroar had it. Helgi said, quote, you speak very arrogantly, dangerously so even. We won your kingdom for you with heroic actions, and we laid our lives down as wagers with the assistance of your father and my foster father Regan and other good men who wanted to join us. Now we certainly would wish to give you gifts if you can accept them because of our kinship. But this kingdom has cost me so much that I will not give it up for any reason, and it's Hroar who has the ring now, and I don't think that he's careless with it. Off quote. With this, Hrok went away feeling very unhappy, and he went to meet King Hroar. Hroar greeted him well with honor, and Hrok stayed there a while with him. And one time, when they left the land and were in a certain fjord, Hrok said, it seems to me that it would give you honor, kinsman, if you gave me the good ring, and in this way remembered our kinship. Off quote. King Hroar said, quote, I have given so much in order to own this ring that nothing will make me give it up. Off quote. Hrok said, then you must promise to let me see the ring, as I have an immense curiosity to know whether it is as good a treasure as it is said to be. Off quote. Quote, that is only a little favor to grant you. Off quote, said Hroar. Quote, and I'll certainly do that. Off quote. Now he brought him the ring. Hrok looked at the ring a little while and said that what men said about it was no exaggeration. Quote, and I have never seen such a treasure, and it is very understandable that you think so much of the ring. It would be the wisest course of action if neither you nor I enjoyed it, nor anyone else. Off quote. And he flung the ring from his hand and out into the sea as far as he could. King Hroar said, quote, you are a thoroughly bad man, off quote. Then he had Hrok's feet cut off and ordered his men to carry him back to his own kingdom. All right, well, the mutilation is a little grim compared to Tolkien's writing about action, but and also I note that the ring is thrown away in jealousy rather than held onto in jealousy. So that's a difference, but very interesting parallel. So thank you, Mike, commenting on the first video for reminding me of that. I probably can't go through all the comments on all the videos, but I'll try to hit a few highlights. The next few after a quick word from my friends and partners at Grimfrost. All right, let's look at some of the top comments on number 2. Guy Incognito says, Tolkien being over-descriptive is a form of world building. He is intentionally making the world feel large, old, and lived in. He writes like a painter would paint. Yeah, I agree. I think that that's something that I've picked up on. Matthew Colville says the kids' book stuff is what his publisher asked for. It's the reason the book exists. They demanded a sequel to The Hobbit. That makes perfect sense. Thinking of a time in the early 1950s where people have read The Hobbit, enjoyed The Hobbit. They obviously haven't read The Silmarillion, and probably haven't read anything that we would call high fantasy today. Maybe The Once and Future King, maybe something like Mort Arthur. But yeah, that he would start off trying to write something that was close to The Hobbit in tone, even if that's not what people want as much today in the 2020s. Yeah, I can understand that. What else do I see in these? Oh, this is interesting. Someone calling himself High King Turgon says, Dr. Crawford, you appear to us in the wilderness at unexpected times, singing songs about and to your lady love. You are Tom Bombadil. I look forward to your yellow boots on the next one. All right, that's a good one to end. I think that got Lauren laughing over there. That's great. All right, thank you. I'll accept. All right, let's get some comments on the next one, on part 3. Someone going by Silly Quiet says, for some reason I really like this series. It's just a critical examination of The Lord of the Rings. You approach it without a lot of the baggage of, quote, this is too well loved and famous to criticize, off quote, and also as someone in a related academic field to the professor himself, it feels like this could almost be a contemporary critique of the book written soon after its publication. It's really refreshing. Well, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I don't come at it completely naive. I have read the books before, although so long ago that I've mostly forgotten them. But I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, as to the this is too well loved and famous to criticize, well, yeah, I think that there's a certain amount of that shows up in the comments, including some of the really pedantic comments. Look, if someone were reading something that I really like, I'll take a really legitimate example would be something by Robinson Jeffers, forgotten early 20th century American poet, but one of my favorite writers, if not my very favorite writer. I mean, here are a bunch of postage stamps of him that I have for no reason other than that I like Robinson Jeffers. Someone reading Cawdor, I think the greatest poem in English. Does it have its flaws? Absolutely, right? It was written at a time when, for example, there was more casual racism in English than anyone would probably dare to be associated with today. I don't think that Jeffers himself was racist, but I think that there were certain turns of phrase that people swam in that one might use at that time without being very conscious of it. So, yeah, someone could criticize that and perhaps dismiss him because of a throwaway line here and there, and probably make me react thinking, well, you've completely missed the artistry here, the narrative here. You've completely missed so much of the context of his own life, his friendship with Langston Hughes and other people that shows a writer who's not a creature of his time in so many ways. And you could probably tell me, oh, this guy's a bad writer for this reason or that reason or whatever the hell you might dislike about it. And I'd probably not love that commentary, but I can also accept that people dislike and like different things. I am not the intended audience of The Lord of the Rings. I think I'm not actually totally sure who Tolkien did think was the intended audience. If he thought it was anyone, I think he was really writing it for himself. And that's fine, that's great. I think that some of the best writers are writing for themselves. I think if you read Moby Dick, that's Herman Melville writing for himself. But, you know, I coming back to this comment about, you know, I don't think the book is too well loved and famous to criticize. I don't worship any literature, right? I don't worship any writer. I don't think that any writer is, by putting, you know, nice words on paper, accomplishing something that puts them beyond the veil of criticism. And I don't think that, you know, as a person of probably low to medium intelligence, that I am not entitled to criticize people who are probably a lot smarter than I am, but who are writing in my language. Anyway, that's too much about that, I suppose. Someone going by Animus Channel says bedding is a running theme in The Lord of the Rings, which is interesting. I do see that going through more of the Fellowship. Quite an emphasis on beds and where people are sleeping, when they're sleeping, etc. Really an odd motif. But I wonder, you know, is J.R.R. Tolkien just a guy who had great sleep hygiene, or someone who really wanted great sleep hygiene? I guess I'd put myself in the latter category. Someone going by Toby Pilling, I suppose, says, quote, I'm an Englishman who lives a few miles south of Oxford and want to say thank you for the great work you do for free. You're welcome. Thanks for saying so. Regarding Tolkien, have you noticed that elves, dwarves, high men, and men of Rohan never use abbreviations or contractions in their speech? That is interesting. I had actually not noticed that. I mean, if I flip through the book, I'm sure that it'll be noticeable now as I start reading it more. Of course, the person that I think of not using contractions is Charles Portis, right? True Grit very obviously avoids contractions, and the 2010 movie at least reflects that pretty faithfully. But really, really interesting to see Tolkien avoid that. I don't know if there was a time in his lifetime when that was associated with lower class speech. I don't think anyone thinks about it today. Or maybe he just didn't like them because he felt like he wanted the meter of the language without those contractions. I don't know, but that's a very interesting point that I had not noticed on my own. Occasionally, by the way, I know in some of these videos, the comments, people pointed out things that I did not notice that were obvious later. Because again, I'm a person of low to medium intelligence. But that one was one I absolutely hadn't noticed. All right, lots of comments. Part 4 video, chapters 10 to 12. People telling me that Aragorn, observing that Luthien was the most beautiful woman ever, but he loves Arwen, telling me that, well, Arwen is supposed to be Luthien reborn in a way, or to look like it, so he's complimenting his own love that way. Okay, all right. Joanne says, I don't think Aragorn is meant to be ugly, just rather grim and stern and weather-worn. Tolkien tells us in the appendix that through long travail he becomes grim to look at unless he chances to smile. Okay. Yeah, he seemed to just really flog him on being really bad to look at, and so I wondered if we were supposed to understand him as being really just literally ugly, like just repulsive. I've decided not to read the appendices until I get to the end of The Return of the King. I mean, that's the order things are printed in, so that's the order that I'm going to read them in this book. I'll probably do a video on the appendices or on one appendix at a time or something like that. P.W. Miles had a comment, some social remarks. He says, with Aragorn's accent signaling social class by one speech is all too familiar in England. By the way, he's only called Strider and Bree. Even Bilbo hasn't heard this name, let alone Legolas or Gimli. As the story progresses, only Sam keeps on calling him Strider. Interesting point. With Sam and the Apple, something I remarked on, I thought that it seemed unnecessarily violent, kind of messed with my characterization of Sam in my mind. Casual minor violence was a bit more common in former times, particularly among the working class. Middle class readers would consider the incident humorous, Also, accurate throwing was a Hobbit specialty, something I forgot about. With the Wraith remark, Aragorn is not being superstitious. Prophetic foresight is a trait of the Northern Dunedain, including himself. Prophecies are not made to be made as jokes. Okay. Makes sense. All of that good contextualization. Lots more comments about Aragorn and ugliness, including from the distinguished gentleman, Matthew Colville. Klaus Ulla says, Tolkien says in one of his letters that he had known people who considered it affected if you said uncle without the N. And Squana Noise says Knuckle is in King Lear. That's what the fool calls Lear. I mean, I associate it with Shakespeare, right? But anything I associate with Shakespeare is something that I would not associate with normal speech. I've never heard anyone say Knuckle, but I don't think that it's a feature of American English at all. And I don't know. I probably know more Scandinavians than Brits. All right, Matthew Colville has an interesting comment worth reading through here. I'll start this quote. Something I don't know if you picked up on because I haven't finished the video. Instant gratification isn't fast enough for me. I know the feeling. Flicks YouTubers do. Is that Tolkien is deliberately employing the archaic language in the Council of Elrond because he doesn't want the reader to get confused. Gandalf actually speaks in a pretty modern mode. Example quote, I liked White better. But in the Council of Elrond, there's something like 17 different speaking parts. If you include all the people who speak in flashbacks, some of these characters like Elrond we never meet again, and some of them only speak in this chapter. So he picks different modes of speech for all of them because he believed it would make the chapter easier to follow. That does make sense, and it does make Boromir's very, very archaic language make some more sense as a distinguishing mark to help you understand who that character is and follow what he's saying. So he picks different modes of speech for all of them because he believed it would make the chapter easier to follow, and I think it works. An editor would have told him to cut half that chapter, all the flashbacks, for instance, because it's simply not how professional novelists write. The Council of Elrond is little more than a boardroom meeting. But Tolkien wasn't a professional novelist, and so he just went for it and believed his audience would keep up if he did a little work on the languages. So you might not know exactly who all these people are, but you can tell, oh, this dude is obviously not a dwarf. He talks totally differently. It's a great point. It does work, even without me being conscious about it. It does work. It was not hard to follow who was speaking, as I recall. I also recall in my own attempts at writing, none of which are worth anything. I wrote a novella in middle school, and I wrote a true novel in college. I tried doing some of this myself, giving people really different, not much of, I dialect irritates people, so not so much trying to suggest accents, it's just trying to get people to word things so differently that you would understand who is speaking. It's tough, right? I respect a writer who can do that well, because I have experimented with doing it, and it's not easy. I see some disagreements about whether Sauron has a body in the book or not. I don't know how to wade into that one. I don't know. I can't tell. Matthew Colville has another comment on this video. Which one is this? The part 5 video, saying the core conceit of the books is that you're really reading the Red Book of Westmarch as written by Bilbo and Frodo. Yeah, I understand that from the comment from Matthew Colville, among others, mentioning that in comments. I don't think that's actually that clear from reading the novel itself. It may say something to that effect really early on, but that's a lot to keep in mind when you are reading, a book just like you would read any other book, right? I don't know that it's pretty hard to forget. It's pretty hard to remember a frame device that isn't constantly mentioned again. I mean, if you read the Prose Edda, Snorri Sturluson's account of Norse myth from the 1200s as distinct from the Poetic Edda, Snorri tries to set it up as a frame where this fellow Gylfi visits the Aesir, the gods, in disguise, and the gods are in disguise, and they're telling him these stories. But you forget the frame story as soon as he's stopped introducing it, right? And I think something kind of similar is going on with looking at this as the Hobbit's book. Also glad I could get people to laugh at me jumping out of my skin when the door alarm went off. That is actually the doorbell, if you can believe that. It is atrocious. All right, let's look at some comments on video 6. Yeah, okay, so there's 2 more. There's video 6 and video 7. I'll look at a couple from each. All right. In video 6, covering book 2, chapters 4 to 6. Okay, we have a note from an actual Sindarin speaker. That's great. Trig M says the phrase pedo melonomino on the door directly means speak, imperative, friend, nominative, and enter imperative. Excellent. I'm just going to quote the rest of this. Quote, in this case, the ambiguity arises due to Sindarin, or is it Sindarin's somewhat strange case system. Generally, the accusative is marked with the lenition of the noun. This nominative melon and accusative velon. Interesting. Okay, that is very Celtic seeming. However, a unique circumstance arises here due to 2 factors. One, Sindarin's writing system doesn't mark direct quotes with punctuation like we do. All right, well, that would be true of most medieval languages, and I guess languages kind of made to be similar to them. 2, when stating a word, one directly quotes the uninflected basic form, also true in Icelandic, which trumps all other grammatical marking. This is then confusable with the much more common vocative case, which, just like the nominative, is unmarked, and unlike the nominative, generally directly follows the verb. This clears it up. This is great. Therefore, we have pedo melon amino, which can either mean speak, friend, and enter in vocative, or speak the word friend and enter with the quoted word in nominative, although functionally accusative. To disambiguate, one would say pedo beth melon amino, speak the word friend and enter. In this case, peth word is placed in the accusative case by leniting it, and then melon can follow without issue or confusion. I hope that makes some sense. It does. Excellent comment. Thank you. That I like getting into, like, I'm not going to sit here and learn Sindarin or Quenya, but I like knowing how much thought he put into it and what his actual intent is there. Matthew Colville has a comment that I'm going to call a hot take. I'm going to quote this here. Quote, Lucas and Tolkien have more in common than I think folks realize. Lucas is the opposite of explain everything. That's part of his real genius. He grew up on the Flash Gordon serials, 10-minute movie shorts, where each episode was just one chapter of a longer story. It was basically impossible to see every episode, and the ones he saw were out of order. But as kids, he and his friends didn't care. They filled in all the gaps using their imagination. Lucas realized that was a more powerful creative act than just sitting there passively being spoon-fed everything. That's a major reason that first Star Wars movie was such a smash. Unlike other movies, the people in Star Wars didn't explain things. They treated the world of Star Wars like it was real. Fast ship, you've never heard of the Millennium Falcon, the ship that did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs? What is the Kessel Run? He never explains it, he just says it and moves on. Everyone says show don't tell, but Lucas knew if he told it, right? The audience would fill in the gaps, and that makes them partners in the creative process. Tolkien felt exactly the same way. He didn't expect his audience to know what Aragorn was referencing when he said, do you wish the House of Isildur to return to Gondor? They wouldn't know what he was referencing, but they would understand what he was talking about from context, and it completely works. It's the reason so many people got hooked. Star Wars and Lord of the Rings are both attempts to give their modern audience a common mythic framework their authors believed their audiences lacked. I think they both succeeded, and for the same reason. They treated their worlds as real and didn't talk down to their audience. I agree 100%, as long as you're talking about the original trilogy. I think once you get into the prequels have a big problem with this, and then the even later movies have an even bigger problem with this in Star Wars. Everything is over-explained. But that original Lucas magic, especially that very first movie, yeah, absolutely, I agree. It's doing the exact same thing the Lord of the Rings is doing. It's letting you swim in it without explaining it. It's not telling you, what every drop in the pool is. It's just throwing you in the pool, and it's great. It's really good. It's the best kind of fantasy and sci-fi storytelling, and I think that it's probably the main thing that less. I don't want to say an ungenerous word, but that less remembered fantasy and sci-fi writers have gotten wrong is over-explaining. All right. Also seen some comments such as this one from, perhaps I should read this as Ed Berga, saying, quote, I was a child in Oxford in the 60s, and I still to this day say things like I shouldn't think so or I should like to, so at least as recently as the 60s that usage was common in the Midlands. that is quite interesting. I did not know that. That this was a common thing in actual spoken languages of the 20th and 21st century. I think in the United States it has not been, if it ever was, for at least since before my grandparents. All right, and then for the last video in the fellowship, video 7 here, lots of people reminding me that the reason Frodo says the homes in Lothlorien are not on Earth is that they are in trees. Yeah, I got that in retrospect. Not brilliant of me not recognizing that, but yeah, I was thinking in a very 21st century way of Earth, meaning planet, not soil. Some nice comments, such as from Caroline, wishing me a quick recovery with my jaw thing. Yeah, that's been stressful and expensive, but I'm doing much better now. Thank you. So is Lauren. Many people wished her good recovery from her terrible near miss with her appendix early on, and she's much better now. Some comments, such as from Joanne, maybe suggesting that I'm seeing the archaic words and phrases as a problem. I don't really see them as a problem. They're not what I would do. I appreciate what Tolkien is doing with them, especially as someone who uses them competently. They're just not. I just don't like artificial archaism. But if I'm going to have it, I would much rather have Tolkien's version of it than William Morris's version of it, or God forbid, the version of it from someone who thinks, the thou is more correct always than you everywhere, and says things like, I have been waiting to hear from the thou, right? It's like, if you're going to use it, please understand it. All right. Some comments about the archaic words in these chapters that I pointed out for, like foss for ditch. The Mr. Master thing for married and unmarried men seems maybe more common in formal English in the UK than here. I'm surprised my mom had that right. A Linden points out a village called Wetwong. Maybe that's how it's pronounced there. I don't know. In the East Riding of Yorkshire. And of course, an excellent note to end on from Magister, that Celeborn is the Sindarin calque of Galadriel's husband's true name, Teleporno. All right, well, with that, I've been talking to the camera for a while. I have appreciated you folks following along with the Lord of the Rings series, and I'll begin the Two Towers shortly. I have read the first 3 chapters. I just need to sit down and record that video or go and make it somewhere. Thanks for all the kindness out there. Thanks for taking it relatively easy on someone who is, after all, close to a Tolkien newbie without being truly a newbie. It's hard to be 100% a newbie when those movies were such a big deal. But anyway, appreciate you folks. And if you haven't done all of your holiday shopping, remember there is an Amazon shop where your purchases can benefit the channel a little bit. Got my books on there as well as some of Tolkien's books. I get just a tiny commission from those sales, so can help the channel that way. Thanks, of course, also to Patreon. Really appreciated all the continued support there. Some people have been there, amazingly since 2016. It's really great, and I've been doing Patreon holiday cards this year, my longest running tradition. So it's been nice to reconnect and make new connections with those very kind folks. So I appreciate you all, and from beautiful Colorado, I think I can safely say that Lauren and I are both wishing you all the best.